Welcome, I'm Jim, and today I'm going to be sharing my opinions on the current and predicted future state of PvP inside Star Citizen. Now, I frequent Spectrum and several large Star Citizen related Discord channels, and I run across the opinion rather frequently that CIG intends to limit PvP interactions. Now, while some of these ideas are pretty reasonable, some are as extreme as options available in games like Elite Dangerous, where a person has the ability to explore the universe, interact with the markets and chat, but are able to otherwise remove or isolate themselves from the rest of the player base. Now, I completely understand the want to remove yourself from interactions of other players. Trust me when I tell you that I've personally lost billions of ISK credits in the game EVE Online from unsolicited PvP encounters. And as odd as this may sound, while yes, the asset loss can be and is frustrating, the need to be constantly aware of your surroundings adds a real sense of danger and, by extension, realism that we never know what tomorrow will have in store for us. Some of the most memorable interactions I had in EVE were actually instances where I had anticipated a trap, and I'd have the biggest smile on my face as I flew by these would-be gankers, just waving my hand out the side of my ship as I safely flew by. But getting back to topic, I just find this idea of Star Citizens being a choose-your-own-adventure book with regards to PvP to be in conflict with what CIG has shared with us about their vision for the game. With nearly every patch, we see mechanics or ships or in-game loops added that shed more light on a game that will give us the freedom to interact with one another in a multitude of ways, some helpful and some not so much. We got to see the system security status that were displayed to us last year at CitizenCon 2023. Now, this display was given to us during the Outpost panel on day 2 of CitizenCon, and honestly, if you haven't watched this, I recommend that you do. As even though all the panels were pretty good this year, this one in particular outlined a multitude of future concepts and also a general direction of the game and where aspects of it are headed. If you'd like to watch it, I do have a link available in the description of the video that'll take you directly to this panel I'm referencing. Now again, this was being shown to us with regards to player outpost, so while we didn't get a wealth of information beyond what these security ratings mean for each type, I think we can safely infer that the 3 categories or classifications of space will extend beyond the player-owned outpost and will also impact the system in general or at large. So firstly, we have high security space, which reading from the screen, we can see this area will provide full protection for our outpost. They say outpost in high sec will be invulnerable and that security will protect us as well. I think from that brief wording, we can reasonably assume that attacks within high sec are still possible. It's just that you'll receive a large and/or quick response from security to assist you. And given that the outpost itself is invulnerable, which they specifically state will be due to planetary shielding, so we can assume they won't utilize some form of an armistice zone. So the ships coming and going from the outpost would be what's left open to attack and in need of defending. Next, we have low security space. And reading from the screen, we can see that we can expect partial protection here. The base is subject to attacks, but you'll receive help from AI NPCs to aid you in those attacks. You'll also be able to build defensive buildings here to further help defend from attackers. And lastly, we see no security, where we see that you will receive no in-game generated help when a location is being attacked. Now, if CIG wanted to create a game void of PvP, they could easily do so. I mean, we already have armistice zones within the game that can disable every action apart from something like ship ramming. So the ability to disable a player's weapon systems already exists in game. But what we do see is CIG molding a universe where actions are largely left up to the players. We're being given all the tools necessary to create traps and ambushes. And while I'm sure at some point CIG will create NPC missions where ships like the Mantis, the Cuddy Blue, and the Scorpius Centaurus are needed to keep an NPC from leaving a particular area of space, at the moment the only real use for those specific ship roles in game is to be used against the player. Now, if you're unaware, CIG has made large improvements to the ship AI combat as of 3.23, where the AI is now reportedly capable of being better at, or at least on par with, the average citizen skills. We've already been experiencing NPC camps that pull us out of quantum occasionally. When we mix that with the improved NPC AI, will we have occasions where NPCs are pulling non-combat ships out of quantum and killing them? Does it change anything for me as the player if I'm dying to NPC camp versus a player's camp? I've lost my ship along with whatever I had on it. I'm either dead or stuck in space waiting on someone to come and assist me. Personally, I'd rather die to a player camp. At least I have some ability to talk my way out of the situation or have some internal thoughts of, I'll remember this as I write down the org names and the name of my attacker. There's no revenge arc available to me when an NPC has interfered with my daily plans of space gaming. However, when it's a player, well, who knows what tomorrow may bring for them. Maybe right now I'm just a new player in my Mustang today. But a year from now, when I encounter this person again, maybe the roles will be reversed. Now, fortunately, we have a few posts from CIG dev Zyloh that gives us a great deal of insight into what the internal mentality at CIG is like with regards to what they deem as acceptable PvP inside of Star Citizen. And so I'm going to read pretty much this post verbatim. We've recently received a lot of reports detailing excessive griefing and would like to take a moment to openly address the feedback and share our stance. For the majority of these matters, a PvP solution is preferred. Frequently, when these scenarios are reported to us, we encourage those who feel they are being targeted to rally with their friends and orgs in an attempt to fight back. We're not here to protect players from aggressors, pirates, and PvPers. A big part of Star Citizens is about that dichotomy. The epic clash that occurs when opposing forces meet and rally others to their cause. The wars at Jumptown were a prime example of the exciting emergent gameplay that can blossom when a lawful player comes face to face with an outlaw. However, there is a line that is occasionally crossed when players are going outside the bounds of immersing themselves as a pirate or PvPer. Some users are going out of their way to leverage live streams and other mediums to excessively grief. In many of these cases, it's no longer about enjoying the game, but rather disrupting it. Stream sniping, pad ramming, firing into Armistice Zone, and utilizing various exploits to grief others. These are just a few examples of excessive griefing, which we do not tolerate. If you find yourself on the receiving end of this, we are more than happy to investigate, and in cases where it's warranted, we will absolutely intervene. Simply reach out to us through our support page here and make sure to provide as much information as possible. Now, what I take away from this is CIG plans on trying to largely stay hands-off on the conflicts between players. But they do acknowledge that there is a line, and obviously so, that once the conflict starts to become something more than just in-game reasoning, that it's more about being vindictive against an actual person, not their in-game character or online persona, that CIG will interfere and determine to the best of their ability how to proceed and intervene in that situation. And I'm completely fine with this style of GMing. We don't want our GMs to determine the winners and losers of a game. It's the player base that should be deciding that. And there's few things more rewarding than seeing those players in game start to reap what they've sown. I for sure have been on the receiving side of this, sitting there watching my sandcastle be kicked over and thinking, yeah, I probably deserve that. But you know, it's fine. I can bounce back from this. Now, the second post from Zyloh was just from this year, and it's largely a repeat of the message from 4 years ago. I'm not going to read the second message in its entirety, but I do have both of these linked down in the description of the video, a link to the spectrum where they were posted. I only intend to comment about this part. And a quote, "Before responding to this thread, I took time to consult our player relations and development teams to ensure that we are all fully aligned." Now, my interpretation of that portion of his message tells me that we aren't just reading a singular dev's mentality. He's taken a moment to calibrate and ensure that his opinions he's about to share are a true reflection of CIG's mentality at large. He goes on to state that we still believe and encourage PvP solutions to an in-game conflict. Our commitment to a player-driven universe remains the same. It's important to note that we are not eager to police PvP encounters, and in the vast majority of cases, we prefer players to engage in organic PvP without intervention. Now, I stress the we in those statements because It again reaffirms that this is the mentality of CIG at large and not just one lone dev post. Now, I don't think CIG is trying to create a system where we have to fight, but I believe they're creating one that will allow us to be in situations where conflict is an option. How we, the players, choose to handle these situations will be left completely up to us. And I, for one, believe this is the best way to go about creating a sandbox MMO. It seems to me that CIG realizes that if they can create a system where players are largely the sole drivers of at least a large portion of the game narrative, then we as the player base will never get to a point of a typical MMO where all of the narrative-driven content has been completed and we're just shouting at CIG to release more in-game content. When the players are the ones creating that in-game content, it's self-renewing. Player-ran organizations will rise and fall. Feuds will develop between players and, by extension, their orgs. You'll see orgs fight over control of resources, strategic locations, and in some cases, organizations might just create conflict just to keep their members engaged and content fed. You'll see orgs that once struggled against each other now awkwardly becoming frenemies, so they can jointly attack a new emerging threat. And that emerging threat could either be a player-related threat or a dev creation. PvP, player versus player. I think when we hear this term, we automatically jump to the thoughts of ship and FPS combat. I mean, that's certainly what I've been discussing this entire episode. But is that really the extent of what PvP is? Are all PvP situations boiled down to one player trying to bash another over the head? Or is the term itself more subjective than that? Are we being disingenuous with ourselves when we take part in what we feel like are solo activities, but should possibly really be described as PvP? If I see a lucrative trade contract available around the same time that you do, are we not engaged in the type of PvP of who can get there first? Will one of us not lose out when we aren't the first in line to retrieve it? If we both have the same idea to build an outpost on a particular claim of land, are we again not competing against one another for that same parcel of land? How far are either of us willing to go to secure it for ourselves or our org? If we're both building the same item to sell the market, are we not engaged in PvP? We'll both want our items to sell first and for the most credits possible. If I'm constantly undercutting your prices, are we not in conflict with one another? I've seen plenty of instances from EVE Online where one retailer would flood the market with a particular item in order to drop the value of that said item down in the local market. And once that item's value had dropped to a particular price, they would buy up all of the stock, only to relist all of those items now back at a much higher markup. Is that griefing? I certainly don't see it as such, and I don't believe CIG would either. Whenever we finally get to play Star Citizen in its final release, I hope we get to explore and experience a universe full of possibilities. One where us, the players themselves, determine the shape of our universe. Not because that's how the devs decided it would be, but because we, the players, fought and struggled to make it that way. And so long as it's us, the players, that have shaped the universe we get, I'll accept it, even if it's not how I'd prefer for it to be, because it will at times be imperfect and unfair, and we're likely to encounter times of great personal struggle in a universe just seemingly full of conflict. But to quote Thomas Paine, the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. And I, for one, am looking forward to all of it, the good and the bad. Thanks for listening today, and as always, see you in the verse.